Following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
All right, good morning, everyone. Let's get started. So we're going to start 6046 in earnest today. We're going to start with our first module on divide and conquer. You've all seen divide and conquer algorithms before. Merge sort is a classic divide and conquer algorithm. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the paradigm, give you a slightly more general setting than merge sort, and then we'll get into two really cool divide and conquer problems in the sense that these are problems for which divide and conquer works very well, namely convex hull and median finding. So before I get started on the material, let me remind you that you should be signing up for a recitation section on Stellar. And please do that even if you don't plan on attending sections, because we need that so we can assign your problem sets to be graded. Okay? So that's our way of partitioning problem sets as well. And then the other thing is problem set 1 is going to go out today. And it's a 1-week problem set. All problem sets are going to be a week in duration. Please read these problem sets the day they come out. Spend 5-10 minutes reading them. Some things are going to look like they're magic, that they're, how could I possibly prove this? If you think about it for a bit, it'll become obvious. We promise you that. But get started early. Don't get started at 7 p.m. when we have a 11:59 p.m. deadline on Thursday. Right? That 4 hours or 5 hours of time may not be enough to go from magical to obvious. Okay? So let's get started with the paradigm associated with divide and conquer. It's just a beautiful notion that you can break up a problem into smaller parts and somehow compose the solutions to the smaller parts. And of course, the details are going to be what's important when we take a particular problem instance. But let's say we're given a problem of size n. We're going to divide it into A subproblems. I'll put that in quotes so you know it's a symbol. A subproblems of size n over b. And here, A is an integer, and A is going to be greater than or equal to 1. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4. This is the generalization I alluded to. And B does not have to be 2 or even an integer, but it has to be strictly greater than 1. Otherwise, there's no notion of divide and conquer. You're not breaking things up into smaller problems. So B should be strictly greater than 1. Right? So that's the general setting. And then you solve each subproblem recursively. And the idea here is that once the subproblems become really small, they become constant size, it's relatively easy to solve them. You can just do exhaustive search. If you have 10 elements and you're doing effectively a cubic search, well, 10 cubed is 1,000. That's a constant. You're in great shape, right? As long as the constants are small enough. And so you're going to recurse until these problems get small. And then typically, this is not true for all divide and conquer approaches, but for most of them, and certainly the ones we're going to cover today, the smarts is going to be in the combination step. When you combine these problems, the solutions of these subproblems into the overall solution. And so that's the story. Typically what happens in terms of efficiency is that you can write a recurrence that's associated with this divide and conquer algorithm, and you say T of n, which is the running time for a problem of size n, is going to be A times T of n over B, and this is a recurrence, plus the work that you need to do for the merge operation, or the combine. So this is the same as merge. And so you get a recurrence, and you're not quite done yet in terms of the analysis, because once you have the recurrence, you do have to solve the recurrence. And it's usually not that hard, and certainly it's not going to be particularly difficult for the divide and conquer examples that we're going to look at least today. But we also have this theorem that's called the Master Theorem that is essentially something where you can fairly mechanically plug in the A's and the B's and whatever you have there, maybe it's theta n, maybe it's theta n square, and get the solution to the recurrence. I'm actually not going to do that today, but you'll hear once again about the Master Theorem tomorrow in section. And it's a fairly straightforward template that you can use for most of the divide and conquer examples we're going to look at in 046, with one exception that we'll look at in median finding today, that will simply give you the solution to the recurrence. Okay? So you've seen most of these things before. That's a little bit of setup. And so let's dive right into Convex Hull, which is my favorite problem when it comes to using divide and conquer. So Convex Hull, I got a little prop here, which will save me from writing on the board and hopefully be more understandable. But the idea here is that in this case, we have a two-dimensional problem with a bunch of points in a two-dimensional plane. You can certainly do convex hull for 3 dimensions, many dimensions. And convexity is something that is a fundamental notion in optimization. And maybe we'll get to that in 6046 in advanced topics, maybe not. But in the context of today's lecture, what we're interested in doing is essentially finding an envelope or a hull associated with a collection of points on a two-dimensional plane. And this hull obviously is going to be something, as you can guess, that encloses all of these points. Okay? So what I have here, if I make this string taut enough, this is not working out so well, but I think you get the picture. All right, so that's not a convex hull. Okay, this is not a convex hull for the reason that I have a bunch of points outside of the hull. All right, so let me just. That is a convex hull. Okay, and now if I start stretching like that, or like this, or like that, that's still a convex hull. Okay, so that's the game. We have to find an algorithm, and we'll look at a couple of different ones that will find all of these segments that are associated with this convex hull. Okay, so this is a segment that's part of the convex hull. That's a segment that's part of the convex hull. If in fact I had something like this, and this was stretched out, because I have those 2 points outside the convex hull, this may still be a segment that's part of the correct convex hull, but this one is not, right? So that's the game here is to find these segments. So we're going to be working with segments or tangents. They're going to be used synonymously. That are all of the tangents or segments associated with the entirety of the convex hull, and we have to discover them. And the only input that we have is the set of points, xi, yi coordinates. Okay, And there's just a variety of algorithms that you can use to do this. The one that I wish I had time to explain, but I'll just mention, is what's called a gift wrapping algorithm, where you might not have done this, but I guarantee you that you probably have taken a misshapen gift, right, and tried to wrap it in gift wrapping paper. And when you're doing that, you're essentially, if you're doing it right, you're essentially trying to find the convex hull of this three-dimensional structure. You're trying to tighten it up. You're trying to find the minimum amount of gift wrapping paper. I'm not sure you ever thought about minimizing gift wrap paper, but you should have. That's the convex hull of this three-dimensional shape, right? But we'll stick to 2 dimensions because we'll have to draw things on the board. So let me just spec this out a bit. We're given n points in a plane, and those set of points are S, xi, yi, such that I equals 1, 2 to n. And we're just going to assume here, just to make things easy, because we don't want to have segments that are null, or segments that are a little bit different because they're discontinuous. But we're going to assume that no two have the same x coordinate. This is just a matter of convenience. And no two have the same y coordinate. And then finally, no 3 in a line. Okay. Because we want to be able to look at pairs of points and find these segments. And it just gets kind of inconvenient. You have to deal with special cases if 3 of them are on a line. And so the convex hull itself is the smallest polygon containing all points in S, and we're going to call that CH of S, okay, convex hull of S. As smallest convex polygon. Thank you. And so, just as an example on the board, when you have something like this, you're going to have your convex hull being that. This one is inside of it. These 2 points are inside of it, and all of the other ones from the hull. And so we might have P, Q, R, S, T, U, and V and X are inside of the hull. They're not part of the specification of CH of S, which I haven't quite told you how we're going to specify that. But the way we're going to specify that is simply by representing it as a sequence of points that are on the boundary, on the hull, in clockwise order. And you can think of this as being a doubly linked list in terms of the data structure that you'd use if you coded this up. So in this case, it would be P to Q to R to S. You're going to start with P in this case. It's a doubly linked list. So you could conceivably start with anything. But that's the representation of the convex hull. Right? And we're going to use clockwise just because we want to be clear as to what order we're enumerating these points is going to become important when we do the divide and conquer algorithm. So let's say that we didn't care about divide and conquer just for the heck of it, and I gave you a bunch of points over here. Can you think of a simple, forget efficiency, for just a couple of minutes. Can you think of a simple algorithm that would generate the segments of the convex hull? For example, I do not want to generate this segment Vx. If I think of a segment as being something that is defined by 2 points, then I don't want to generate the segment Vx, because clearly the segment is not part of the convex hull. But whereas the segment PQ, QR, RS, etc., they're all part of the convex hull, right? So what is the obvious brute force algorithm, forgetting efficiency, that given this set of points will generate one by one the segments of the convex hull? Anybody? Did you have your hand up? No? Go ahead. Yeah. Draw the line and check how many lines it intersects with. Is there? I think you draw the line. That's good, right? Well, but you want to do a little bit more. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
For every pair of points, you make a half plane and see whether it contains all of the other points, and you keep doing that until you get all the half.
So that's good. That's good. All right. So the first person who breaks the ice here always gets a frisbee. Sorry, man. At least I only hit the lecturer, right? No liability considerations here. Okay, now I'm getting scared. Right. So I think there's a certain amount of, when I throw this, am I going to choke or not, right? But it's going to get harder when one of you guys at the back answers the question. So you're exactly right. And you draw a line, and then you just look at it, and you look at the half plane. And if all the points are to one side, it is a segment of the convex hull. If they're not, it's not a segment. Beautiful, right? Are we done? Can we go enjoy the good weather outside? Right? No, we got a ways to go here, right? So this is not a segment, whereas this one, let me draw that. I should draw these in dotted way. This is not a segment. This is not a segment. This is a segment. And I violated my rule of these three not being in a straight line, so I'll move this over here. And then that's a segment, and so on and so forth. Okay? Right? I'm sorry? Oh, you're right. That's a good point. That's an excellent point. So what happened here was, when I moved that out, you're exactly right. Thank you. This is good. So when I moved this out here, what happened was, and I drew this, well, this one here, my convex hull changed. The problem specification changed on me. It was my fault. But then what would happen, of course, is as I move this, that would become the segment that was part of the convex hull. Okay? So sorry to confuse people, but what we have here in terms of an algorithm, if I leave the points the same, works perfectly well. Right? So let me just leave the points the same and just quickly recap, which is I'm going to take a pair of points, and I'm going to draw, and let me just draw this in a dotted fashion first, and I'm going to say that's the segment. Now I'm going to take a look at that line and say this breaks up the plane into two half planes. Are all the points on one side? And if the answer is yes, I'm going to go ahead and, boom, say that is a segment of my convex hull. If the answer is no, like in this case, I'm going to drop that segment. Okay? So now let's talk about complexity. Let's say that there are n points here. And how many segments do I have? I have order n squared, theta n squared segments. And what is the complexity of the test? What is the complexity of the test that's associated with, once I've drawn the segments, deciding whether the segment is going to be a tangent, which is part of the convex hull or not? What is the complexity? ON. Exactly right. So ON test complexity. And so we got overall theta n cubed complexity. Okay? So it makes sense to do divide and conquer if you can do better than this, because this is a really simple algorithm. Right? The good news is we will be able to do better than that. And now that we have a particular algorithm, I'm not quite ready to show you that yet. Now that we have a particular algorithm, we can think about how we can improve things. And of course, we're going to use divide and conquer. So let's go ahead and do that. And so generally, with divide and conquer, as I mentioned before, in most cases, the division is pretty straightforward. And that's the case here as well. All the fun is going to be in the merge step. Right? So what we're going to do, as you can imagine, is we're going to take these points and we're going to break them up. Right? And the way we're going to break them up is by dividing them into half planes. We're going to just draw a line, and we're going to say everything to the left of the line is one subproblem. Everything to the right of the line is another subproblem. Go off and find the convex hull for each of the subproblems. If you have 2 points, you're done, obviously. It's trivial.
And at some point, you can say, I'm just going to deal with brute force. We can go down to order n cubed. If n is small, I can just apply that algorithm. So it doesn't even have to be the base case of n equals 1 or n equals 2. That's a perfectly fine thing to do. But you can certainly go with n equals 10, as I mentioned before, and run this brute force algorithm. And so at that point, you know that you can get down to small enough size subproblems for which you can find the convex hull efficiently. And then you got these two convex hulls, right, which are clearly on well, two different half planes, because that's the way you define them. And now you got to merge them, right? And that's where all the fun is. Okay. So let's just write this out again. We're going to sort the points by x coordinates, and we're going to do this once and for all. We don't have to keep sorting here, because we're just going to be partitioning based on x coordinates, and we can keep splitting based on x coordinates because we want to generate these half planes, right? So we can do this once and for all. And for the input set S, we're going to divide into the left half A and right half B by the x coordinates. And then we're going to compute CH of A and CH of B recursively. And then we're going to combine. So the only difference here from what we had before is the specification of the division. It looked pretty generic. It's similar to the paradigm that I wrote before, but I've specified exactly how I'm going to break this up. All right? So let's start with the merge operation. We're going to spend most of our time speccing that. And again, there's many ways you can do the merge, and we want the most efficient way. That's obviously going to determine complexity. So big question, how to merge. Right. So what I have here, if I look at the merge step, is I've created my two subproblems corresponding to these two half planes. And what I have here is, let's say I've generated at this point a convex hull associated with each of these subproblems. Okay, so what I have here is A1, A2. I'm going to go clockwise to specify the convex hull. And the other thing that I'm going to do is, in the subproblem case, my starting point is going to be, for the left subproblem, the coordinate that has the highest x value. Okay, so that's A1 in this case, the highest x value, going over x is increasing to the right. And for the right half of the problem, it's going to be the coordinate that has the lowest x value. And I'm going to go clockwise in both of these cases. So when you see an ordering here associated with the subscripts for these points, start with A1 or B1 and then go clockwise. And that's how we number this. Right? So just notational, nothing profound here. So I got these two convex hulls, these sub-hulls, if you will. And what I need to do now is merge them together. And you can obviously look at this, and it's kind of obvious, what the overall convex hull is, right? But the key thing is, I'm going to have to look at each of the pairs of points that are associated with this and that, and try to generate the tangents, the new tangents that are not part of the sub-hulls, but they're part of the overall hull, right? And so in this case, you can imagine an algorithm that is going to kind of do what this brute force algorithm does, except that it's looking at a point from here and a point from here, right? So you can imagine that I'm going to do a pairwise generation of segments, and then I'm going to check to see whether these segments are actually tangents, they're part of the overall convex hull or not, okay? So what I would do here is I'd look at this, and is that going to be part of the overall hull? No, and precisely why not? Someone tell me why this segment A1, B1 is not part of the overall hull? Yeah, go ahead. Exactly right. That's exactly right. So here you go. So that's not part of it. Now, if I look at this, well, same reason, that's not part of it. In this case, and this is a fairly obvious example, I'm going to do something that's slightly less obvious in case you get your hopes up that we have this trivial algorithm. Okay. This is looking good, right? That's supposed to be a straight line, by the way. Okay. So A4, B2, and that's looking good, right? Because all the points are on one side. So A4, B2 is our upper tangent.